Marcus Reed stepped through the glass doors of a towering corporate office in downtown Chicago, his reflection briefly staring back at him from the polished surface. His navy suit was simple but sharp, his posture steady, his eyes focused. This wasn't just another job. This was the opportunity he had chased for years, a junior analyst position at one of the fastest-growing consulting firms in the country. But the moment he walked in, something felt off. The receptionist barely looked up, her fingers tapping lazily across the keyboard as if his presence didn't deserve attention. When he politely introduced himself, she glanced at him, paused, and then asked flatly, "Maintenance." The word hung in the air longer than it should have. Marcus didn't react the way she expected. He simply smiled, calm and controlled. "Now I'm here for the junior analyst position. Today's my first day." The receptionist's expression shifted slightly, but not enough to hide the assumption she had already made. She printed a badge and slid it across the desk. Temp was written across it in bold red letters. Marcus noticed immediately. He had signed a full-time contract, but he didn't argue. Not here, not yet. He took the badge, thanked her, and walked toward the elevators, already feeling the weight of silent judgment pressing on his shoulders. Inside the elevator, two employees stood side by side. One of them glanced at Marcus's badge and smirked. "Temp? Huh, rough gig," he said under his breath. The other chuckled softly. Marcus ignored them. He stared straight ahead, watching the numbers climb, his expression unreadable. He had learned long ago that reacting to small insults only fed bigger ones. Silence, patience, timing, those were his tools. And he knew exactly when to use them. On the 14th floor, his manager, Daniel Harper, greeted him with a handshake that felt more like a formality than a welcome. Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We run a tight ship here," he said while leading Marcus through rows of desks filled with busy employees. "You'll need to keep up. No room for mistakes." Marcus nodded respectfully. He listened carefully, not just to the words, but to the tone behind them. He was assigned a desk at the back of the office, right next to the printer, a place where people passed constantly but rarely stopped. As the day unfolded, Marcus quickly noticed a pattern. During meetings, his ideas were ignored, only to be praised minutes later when repeated by someone else. Emails he sent went unanswered, while others received quick replies. Small jokes floated around him, just loud enough to hear but quiet enough to deny. It wasn't obvious discrimination. It was subtle, quiet, designed to make him question himself. But Marcus didn't question himself. He observed, he remembered. At lunch, Marcus sat alone in the cafeteria, scrolling through his phone, keeping to himself. That's when Tyler, one of his coworkers, dropped into the seat across from him without asking. "You know you're lucky, right?" Tyler said casually, leaning back in his chair. Marcus looked up slowly. "Lucky," he repeated. Tyler smirked. "Yeah. Diversity hire. Companies trying to look good." The words were said lightly, but the meaning behind them was heavy. Marcus held his gaze for a moment, then simply nodded and went back to his phone. Tyler laughed softly, as if he had proven a point, and walked away. Days turned into weeks, and the treatment didn't change. If anything, it became more refined. Marcus was given smaller tasks, overlooked for major projects, and constantly underestimated. But behind the scenes, he worked harder than anyone else. He stayed late, reviewed reports, studied company data, and quietly fixed mistakes others didn't even realize they had made. He wasn't there to fit in. He was there to prove something not to them, but to himself. One afternoon, the company prepared for a major client presentation. It was the kind of deal that could define careers. Daniel assigned the project to Tyler and a few others, completely overlooking Marcus's. But when Tyler struggled to finalize the numbers, the team began to panic. Deadlines were closing in, and nothing was adding up. That's when Marcus quietly stepped in. "I think there's an error in the projection model," he said calmly. Tyler frowned. "We've already checked it." Marcus didn't argue. He simply opened his laptop and walked them through the data step by step. Within minutes, the room went silent. Marcus had found not just one mistake, but several errors that could have cost the company millions. He corrected them quickly, efficiently, without hesitation. Daniel watched closely, his expression shifting for the first time. "How did you catch that?" he asked. Marcus looked up. "I reviewed the data last night," he said simply. No arrogance, no pride, just truth. The presentation went smoothly the next day. The client was impressed. The deal was secured. Everyone celebrated. But something had changed. People started looking at Marcus differently. Not with respect, not yet, but with curiosity. Doubt had turned into uncertainty. And uncertainty was the beginning of change. A week later, the company announced a surprise internal audit. A senior executive from headquarters would be visiting to review team performance and workplace culture. The office buzzed with nervous energy. When the day arrived, everyone gathered in the main conference room. The doors opened, and the room fell silent. Marcus walked in, but he wasn't wearing his usual navy suit. This time, his presence was different, confident, commanding. Beside him stood members of the executive board. Daniel's face went pale. Tyler shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Good morning," he began. "For the past month, I've been working here under a different role, observing, evaluating." He paused, letting the silence settle. "I'm not a junior analyst." A ripple of shock moved through the room. "I'm part of the executive leadership team," Marcus continued. "And this was a culture assessment." No one spoke. I saw how people were treated, who was heard, who was ignored, and why. His eyes moved across the room, stopping briefly on Daniel, then Tyler. "This company prides itself on innovation, but innovation doesn't survive where bias exists." Daniel stepped forward nervously. "Marcus, I think there's been a misunderstanding there, hasn't?" Marcus interrupted calmly. "There's been an exposure." The room was completely still now. "Effective immediately," Marcus continued. "There will be restructuring, leadership changes, and mandatory bias training across all departments." Tyler looked down, unable to meet his gaze. Marcus took a breath, then added, "Talent should never have to prove its worth twice just to be seen once." And for the first time since he walked into that building, the silence around him wasn't filled with judgment. It was filled with understanding. The room didn't move for several seconds after Marcus finished speaking, as if everyone was trying to process what had just happened while also pretending they had seen it coming. But the truth was written all over their faces in the form of shock, guilt, and discomfort that couldn't be hidden no matter how hard they tried. Daniel cleared his throat, attempting to regain some control of the situation, but his voice lacked the authority it once carried. We always strive for a fair workplace," he said, though even he seemed unsure of his own words. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at him, not with anger, but with a calm clarity that made the silence even heavier. "Fair isn't something you say," Marcus replied after a moment. "It's something you show, every day, in every decision." His voice remained steady, but each word landed with precision. No one interrupted him now. No one smirked. No one whispered. He turned slightly, addressing the entire room. "I paid attention to everything, the small things most people ignore. Who gets acknowledged in meetings? Who gets interrupted? Who has to repeat themselves just to be heard?" His eyes briefly met those of a few employees who quickly looked away. Bias doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's quiet, and that's what makes it dangerous. Tyler shifted in his seat, his confidence completely gone. For the first time since Marcus had met him, he looked uncertain, almost nervous. "I didn't mean anything by what I said before," Tyler muttered, barely loud enough to hear. Marcus looked at him, not harshly, but directly. "That's exactly the problem," he said. "You didn't mean anything, and yet it meant something." The words settled deep. Tyler had no response this time. One of the senior board members stepped forward, nodding slightly at Marcus, signaling that he had full support. That alone changed the atmosphere even further. This wasn't just a speech. This was a decision already backed by power. "Starting today," Marcus continued, "performance evaluations will be reviewed, not just based on results, but on leadership, behavior, communication, and team inclusion." He paused briefly before adding, "Some of you will be given the opportunity to improve. Others will not." Daniel's face tightened slightly, but he remained silent. "In the coming weeks," Marcus went on, "we'll also be opening anonymous reporting channels, real ones, not systems that bury complaints under paperwork." A few employees exchanged glances. This was something they clearly hadn't expected. Marcus stepped back slightly, but his presence still held the room. "This isn't about punishment," he said. "It's about accountability and growth. But growth only happens when people are willing to see the truth about themselves." The meeting ended shortly after, but no one rushed out. Conversations were quieter now, more careful. The same office that once buzzed with casual confidence now carried a different kind of energy, one filled with awareness. Over the next few days, changes began immediately. Managers were called into private meetings, team structures were reviewed. Some employees who had once felt invisible suddenly found their voices being heard. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. Marcus returned to the office floor, not as the quiet observer anymore, but as someone people now recognized. Some greeted him politely, others avoided eye contact altogether. But one thing was clear, the way he was seen had changed. One afternoon, as Marcus reviewed reports at his desk, he noticed someone approaching slowly. It was Tyler. For a moment, Tyler just stood there, as if unsure whether to speak. Then he finally said, "Can I sit?" Marcus looked up, then nodded once. Go ahead. Tyler sat down, leaning forward slightly, his usual confidence completely gone. I've been thinking about everything, he said. About what I said, how I acted. He paused, struggling to find the right words. I guess I never really saw it. Marcus listened quietly, giving him space to continue. I thought if I wasn't being openly racist, then I wasn't part of the problem, Tyler admitted. But now, I get it. At least, I'm starting to. Marcus nodded slightly. Understanding is a start, he said. But it doesn't mean much without change. Tyler exhaled slowly. I want to do better, he said. Not just because of this, but because I should have been better from the beginning. Marcus studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Then start by listening, he said. Not to respond. Not to defend. Just to understand. Tyler nodded back, more seriously this time. I will. As Tyler walked away, Marcus returned to his work, but there was a subtle shift in his expression, not satisfaction, not victory, but something quieter. Progress. Weeks passed, and the office slowly transformed. Meetings became more balanced. Voices that were once ignored were now acknowledged. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments where old habits tried to return, but now they were noticed.